Well, thank you, Chaz. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Lee. I'm an alcoholic. Just wanted to take a moment, and I've been sitting up front here most of the weekend, and so to be here and be able to really look out and see you guys, it's quite a sight. And I asked Chaz to read that short one sentence, number one, so as not to challenge him. Number two, so as not to eat up too much of my time. But number three, because I think that this gathering really represents the culmination in some ways of that sentence. I don't think when this book was written, and Bill was hoping that when this chip of a book goes out, right, and that he would hope that sometime that AA would be available in every hamlet, that he could envision a gathering like this, and so many others that we all get to attend and go to around the country. I don't think he could have imagined that rather than loading up and having to decide which 50 or 100 miles to go to catch a meeting, that we're trying to figure out the most convenient option at 5 p.m. And that's a blessing. That's not finger wagging. That is a blessing. And I certainly am grateful for that. I'm so grateful to be here. I think I know it's at least the fourth, but possibly the fifth time that I've been here at State Line. And always it's a joy to see so many friends that I have from around the country. This is kind of a gathering spot at the end of the year. For those of you and that are so active in your own areas, and we just tend to come here and celebrate together, and I really enjoy and appreciate that. I hope I'm up to the task today. I got some help. My buddy Ralph said a prayer for me, and because I said I need somebody better connected than me, Ralph, to help, and so Ralph said a prayer, and as part of that prayer, he asked that maybe God speak through me. And it made me think, I called my wife a couple, 3 years ago now. I'd spoken somewhere, and I called her the next morning, and I said, I just gave a terrible talk last night. And I said, I was just all over the place, and I'm embarrassed about it. And she said, well, Stephen, I hope that God was talking. And I said, down in the hospitality suite, they're blaming me for God's talk. And somehow I'm attached to that. And so that could happen here as well. You know, I was asked to talk about the chapter, A Vision for You. And we'll endeavor to do that, hopefully laced with my own experience with what we find here in the book, because that's what we do, right? I think earlier, and so many people have alluded to it as Kent did just a little while ago, that it's not the information that makes the difference. It's critical. But in and of itself, it's not very useful. That we've got to take the information and put it into application to bring about the transformation. And Alcoholics Anonymous is a transformative program. It's not. I'm no smarter than the day I got here. I was in line. I was talking to somebody just a minute ago. Said you don't have to be that smart in AA. I said, thank goodness that intellect and virtue are not requirements for Alcoholics Anonymous, because I'm short on both counts. And my first sponsor, Frank, used to say, he said, Steve, you're going to hear that you can be too smart to get AA, but you can't be too dumb to get AA. And he said, that's not even true. He said, being smart's not the problem. It's thinking you're smart that's the problem. And isn't that true for me? It's when I think, when I show up already knowing the answer to the question. I think what somebody said earlier today, I guess Laura's seen how hard it is to work this program when you're already perfect. But what if I can stay open-minded? What if I can stay willing to grow along spiritual lines, as Kent said? What if I can do that while having enough humility to be comfortable in this imperfect package? You know, a vision for you, as I kind of looked at it preparing, and when I say looked at it preparing for this talk, I mean during the lunch break today. It dawns on me that this actually could be the first chapter in the book. You know, it is a chapter of hope. And it is a chapter that shares some of that history that Kent talked about. And then a chapter that drives home that end message that my real reliance is on Him. Not the meetings I attend, not the passages I can quote, but a real reliance upon Him. It seems, I know that it could be for a new person, because it starts by helping a guy like me understand. It's kind of a short version, that first page and a half of a vision for you of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And what it was like, it says that for most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, colorful imagination, release from care, boredom, and worry, and a feeling that life is good. I got a little thirsty just saying that. That's an attractive package, right? Who wouldn't want a glass of that? And that's what maybe most normal folks get, right? Maybe that's what that man or woman that goes home and has a beer or two and smokes half a joint and starts watching SVU and they eating some Ben & Jerry's. What could be wrong with that? But not so for those of us in the latter days of our drinking. I had periods of that. I had times like that. You know, some people say, and I argue with no one, as it was already said, I can't argue about your experience. But some people say that their worst day sober is better than their best day drinking. I want to tell you, my best day drinking was a hell of a day. I mean, we had a good time on my best day drinking. And in fact, there were a lot of them. But somewhere not so in the latter days of my drinking. Maybe momentarily, the book says. Even in the latter days, maybe momentarily. I don't know, maybe after drink 5 or 6, or maybe at 10 or 11 at night. I don't know, but momentarily, life felt like it was good. It says, but then comes oblivion. And awakening to face the hideous 4 horsemen of terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. It says, unhappy drinkers who read this will understand. And apparently by the time I saw this part of the book, I was indeed an unhappy drinker, because I did understand. Terror, bewilderment. How did this happen again? How? When I was not going to do, I didn't spend a lot of time before I got to AA trying to not drink. But I spent a lot of time trying to not let that happen again. I won't do that again. I won't hurt her again. I won't embarrass them again. I won't let them down again. I didn't want my drinking to look like that. But the idea of not drinking at all did not seem like something that I could consider, and mostly because I didn't understand alcoholism, right? I didn't understand that what's been talked about. And when my friend Don gets up here tonight and begins that journey through the steps and talks about that first step, he will expound upon it, I am sure. But I didn't understand that physical allergy. I didn't understand that mental obsession. I didn't understand why this happened again. You know, back in To the Employer, and I know that I'm in a room full of over 1,000 AA zealots. But you got to be an absolute fanatic to read all the way to the employer. Yeah, I promise you, those pages are not dog-eared in your book, right? Or you get down around page 30, you can barely turn the page, but back there, baby, they're sticking together to the employer. But it says back there, among many other things, that when dealing with an alcoholic, there may be a natural annoyance that someone could be so weak, stupid, and irresponsible. And see, that's to the untrained eye, alcoholism looks weak, stupid, and irresponsible. It looks like if you loved me, you wouldn't do that. It looks like if you cared about this job, you wouldn't do that. It looks like, Steve, if you cared about this family, you wouldn't have shown up. 2 days ago is my daughter's birthday, December 17th, whatever today is. On December 17th of 1982, I showed up at that hospital drunk. Or 1983, I showed up drunk. I'm back in the delivery room, and they had to escort me out. For over 10 years after that, I made up a lie. You know, when you get together sometimes and be with parents, and somebody might tell that beautiful story about the birth of their child, and I just made one up. You know, Connie and Abby, neither one remembered. So I just made one up. I was several years sober before I told them about what happened. So if you loved your daughter and your wife at this most important moment, how weak, stupid, and irresponsible must you be? I was in a meeting not too long ago. There was a woman in there distraught. She had lost custody of her children yet again. She had been sober for a while. Then she had gotten drunk, and she had lost custody of her children. And she said, I love alcohol more than I love my children. And I talked to her afterwards. I said, I don't believe that. I said, but alcoholism is more powerful than the love for your children. So it looks weak, stupid, and irresponsible. In 1980, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. My sobriety date, so you know I've got one, is June the 30th, 1989, so to give some context to the stories I tell. In 1980, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'd been at a bar one afternoon drinking kamikazes and taking Tuanols. That's an old school barbiturate drug. You don't see, I don't know if you got any in here today, but anyway, I left there and I got disoriented and I went east in the westbound lane of I-285 perimeter of Atlanta, and I hit a car head on. And 2 other cars hit us. It totaled all 4 cars. It sent some people to the hospital. It sent me to the Cobb County Jail. And I came to in that jail, and I had urinated on myself, and I had vomited on myself. Or, as I say, I hope I did, because somebody did. And but that's the state I found myself in. And man, I quit drinking that morning. Right? I quit drinking forever that morning. And I'd never been so afraid of the consequences, legal and personal and professional, that awaited me. I'd never been more ashamed of the harm I'd caused other people. I did not yet know the extent of the injuries, and they turned out not to be, thank God that they weren't fatal and certainly not even critical. And I'd never been so humiliated at the state I found myself, sitting there in my own urine and my own vomit on a Saturday morning in that drunk tank. And I'd never been more sure that I'll never drink again. And 10 days later, I'm driving down the road, smoking a joint, drinking a bottle of wine, thinking I nearly overreacted to that. Now, we laugh here, we laugh knowingly. And if you're new here, I want you to know there's a few times that I may make light of something But I want you to know none of it was funny while it was happening. But we are fortunate to be here and be able to look through the prism of today's recovery back at a life that made no sense. I look, and when we say that our alcoholic life seemed the only normal one, and sometimes I look back and go, how could I have ever normalized the life I was living? But I'm looking through an alcoholic mind that can't differentiate the true from the false. So it says, then comes oblivion and awakening to face the hideous four horsemen. Terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. So when it says a guy like me, if I'm laying myself over the words in this book, and that's what I'm doing for purposes of this talk. But now I can't imagine life without alcohol. And pretty soon I can't imagine life with or without alcohol. I don't know what to do. I end up in a treatment program, but as a result of another DUI where I hit a policeman head on going. I wasn't going very fast on that next one. It was a side street, but apparently that'll still get you arrested in Brentwood, Tennessee. And they sent me to jail for a little, just not a, little county jail and they cut some time off if I would go to residential drug and alcohol rehabilitation. I didn't even really know what all that meant. I'd never heard all those words strung together at one time. But it sounded marginally better than jail. So I go, and while I'm there, and I want to tell you that my treatment experience was a very positive experience. I didn't know the difference in treatment and AA. I couldn't tell when shift changed. And some AA guys came in and they said, we're going to have an AA meeting. But what did change when they came in is in the treatment environment, in a very appropriate way, I think, they were trying to help me. And I felt like I'd been charged with the crime of alcoholism. And they were trying to convict me of the crime. By asking me questions and using my answers. By the way, Larcene, had I known that going commando was one of the indicators of alcoholism, it would have been easier for me to transition sooner. That's tangible, right? You can get your arms around that. You wearing them or not wearing them, Steve? Like they say in Seinfeld, there's nothing between you and me but this gabardine, okay? Anyway, sometime during that stay, I arrived at a conclusion that I need to not drink, right? I'm not saying I'm alcoholic. I don't quite know even what that means, but I need to not drink. And so I said, since we are kind of going out we went to a variety of 12-step meetings, and a variety of 12-step fellowships brought meetings in, and I'm really grateful for that because it allowed me, because I qualify for multiple 12-step programs, but I identify most closely in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that became clear where I was going to go. I said, I think I'll go to AA since I'm going to try to not drink. I think that's where I'll try to not drink, but I didn't know what that was going to look like. And if you're new, and I know that mostly we're preaching to the choir in here, but there may be a new person or two that wandered in or came with a good friend. And I know I need to not drink, but I thought that we were going to do a lot of not drinking in Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought not drinking was an actual activity in Alcoholics Anonymous. We'll get together and not drink, right? Yeah. Would you look at Kent not drink over there? Well, actually, Kent's drinking right now, but look at the technique on him. And guys would call and say, hey, Steve, we're going to go to the Raiders-Titans game on Sunday. You want to go? And boy, I'd love going to a football game. I said, boys, I'd love to go, but Sunday I am busy. I will be home not drinking. And somebody said, don't drink even if your ass falls off. So I'll be home not drinking, guarding my ass. And I'm going to not drink. And it's going to be pitiful. And my life is going to be all about where I can't go and what I can't do and who I can't hang out with. It's going to get small. But see, I had no idea how small my life had become. I had to step back from that for a while before I could look back and see the number of places I could not or would not go back to. The people who had slowly moved themselves out of my life. The places when I felt trapped at home and can't go out because of that discomfort. AA, as you guys know, we know it here, has opened my life up. So it says we've shown, I'm asking people, and the book says we've shown how we got out from under. You say, yeah, I'm willing. I'm telling you guys, I'm willing. But shall I be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum like some righteous people I see? There's a couple of things in that for me. Number one, even here in AA today, I best guard against being righteous. Because I can get righteous in AA. I was at a correctional facility a number of years ago, and I was dressed up like I am now because I'd come straight from a business thing where I had to be dressed up, and I was a little early and in the cafeteria where the meeting was going to be, but the guys weren't there yet, and there was a guy cleaning up. And he came over and he said, "Are you preaching tonight?" And I said, "Well, I wasn't invited to, but I'm prone to." And so I got to watch that preaching, right? Because it's not very attractive here in AA. Hopefully we share. That shares an important word. And it says we tell the new man exactly what happened to us. So you've shown how you got, but am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum? And my sponsor, Frank, said, well, Steve-O, you're stuck with stupid. But boring and glum are going to be optional for you. And hadn't that been the truth? And I'll tell you something else. I don't even mind being boring. If I'm boring, it's pretty much your problem. Yeah. If I'm bored, it's my problem. Some of you are bored right now. I'm having a blast. I could care less. I know I must get along without liquor, but have you a sufficient substitute? You know, it's amazing that a guy like me gets to Alcoholics Anonymous, and everything that alcohol did to me, somehow it still feels like a sacrifice and I'm going to put it down. Somehow I'm looking, well, what's my payback? What do you got for me, Mr. AA? You know, my relationship with alcohol was like relationship, an abusive relationship, right? And please, no one take offense. I'm not making light of anything there, but it's like when I watch a movie where there's a relationship and he or she is going back to him or her, and I'm watching and going, don't go. Can't you see? Don't go back. This is going to end poorly. But that's how my relationship with alcohol was. And I would have a situation like that, being in that jail cell, in that drunk tank, and break up with alcohol. And then about a week later, I'd get an alcohol booty call. Yeah. And you know how it is. It just goes, hey, Steve, just let me come over. Yeah. We'll just cuddle. We'd have a couple of nice nights together. Then it'd beat the hell out of me again. Have you a sufficient substitute? Yes. Yes, if you're new. And it is vastly more than that. It's a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. So we find the fellowship, so will you. Let me break that down a little bit. I know every one of you or most of you have paid attention to this, but it jumped out at me just a few years ago in a way that was impactful. What most people get artificially, synthetically, all the way back in the doctor's opinion when he talks about how we couldn't provide a synthetic cure. Synthetically, alcohol in certain doses fires my imagination. It says I'll have colorful imagination. Over here it says my imagination will be fired. It says I will have joyous intimacy with friends in AA. It says that I'll have a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. It says release from care, boredom, and worry, which is the exact same language. But here's where it makes a hard shift that's been meaningful for me. When I drank, I would get a feeling that life is good. It would be an illusion. It will be the result of a painkiller when I think my pain is gone. The pain isn't gone. I just can't feel it right now. It is blocked. But in AA, it says life will mean something at last. To me, that's a significant difference. And then it says the most satisfying years of my existence lie ahead. Satisfying is a critical word for me. Because if I'm satisfied, I spent all of my life unknowingly, Kent spoke to it earlier, looking outside myself, trying to be self-satisfied. Self-satisfied through some external resource, through the job, the money, the relationship, the way you pick it. I'm looking out here for something. When you guys have been telling me it's an inside job ever since I got here. So for my life to be satisfying, to be satiated, there's nothing missing in those moments. I've continued, what's been so clear over the last several years, again, is how often, and I certainly continue to lapse into this, is looking outside for a solution. All my problems are internal. Many of you have heard and maybe heard me tell the story. I've heard it both as a Sufi story and as a Native American story. I just make it some Tennessee rednecks. And in my story, there's a guy outside. He's lost the keys to his truck. And he's crawling around on his hands and knees out in the front yard by his truck looking for the keys. And pretty soon, a couple of his buddies drive by and they see him and ask him what's going on. And he tells them. And as friends are wont to do, they get out and start helping him look for the keys. And they're crawling around. And pretty soon, a few more guys come by. And before you know it, you got 8 or 10 people just painstakingly combing through every blade of grass looking for those keys. And finally, one of them asked, "Where were you when you lost the keys?" And he said, "I was in the house." And they said, "What are we doing out here?" And he said, "Well, the light is so much better out here." See, I keep looking out here. And I'll tell my story so convincingly to you that you will affirm me and help me look. And we will talk about that transgression that's been committed against me, that lack of respect that's being shown me, that undervalue at the workplace, whatever my problem as I choose to describe it. And I've said for a number of years that my problem is not my problem. My problem is that my problem is a problem. I'm the one that labels something a problem. What if I didn't? I think, what if I'm not the one that said that's a problem? My sponsor, Joe S., when I lived in Richmond, Virginia, Joe and I were going through the book one day, and now, I'm about 3 years sober, 4 years sober. I'm at that point where it's clearly, I knew so much more than Joe. And I know it's not true of all of you, but some of us are just gifted. And I understood the book in a way that not many people did. And And in fact, often knew what Bill meant to say. And Joe and I are going through there, and where it says and how it works, that some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. And I said, Joe, that bothers me because that implies that I never had a good idea before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I actually showed up with some damn good ideas. And he said, Steve, that's not what it means. He said, and we're sure that you showed up with some good ideas. He said, none of us have heard one yet, but we are sure that you did. He said, but all that really means is that are you willing to set your old ideas down? It doesn't say that they're all bad, that they're all without value, but if you're willing to put them all down and go through this process, the good ones will find their way back. He said, because your problem is you have no spiritual discernment. You can't tell the good ideas from the bad ideas. They are commingled up in your head. But he also said, the first old idea you need to let go of is the idea that you think you know what just happened. He says, because you're going to want to call it good or bad, right or wrong, should or shouldn't, fair or unfair. And he said, those are feelings, and the feelings are legitimate. You're entitled to whatever feelings you want to have. But you may see with a little time and distance that something may have shifted your life in a direction that you didn't have the wisdom or courage to choose for yourself. And that has happened so often. So it doesn't always comfort me in the moment. But I know that this is a long journey we're on, right? We're ebbing and flowing, and we tend, as my sponsor Bob says, we live life forward, but we understand it backward. We look back, and now I can see the spiritual threads that we're tying this together. Then this chapter moves, and Kent, I loved Kent's talk. Unfortunately, about half of it was the talk I was going to give. Not as well as Kent, but there's some history in here, right? And actually it talks a lot about that first meeting and it says for that newcomer, it says maybe the best way we can talk about this is to give a little history. And it talks about when Bill met up with Bob. It talks about that seminal moment, right? In the Mayflower Hotel. When Bill is down, when he is wondering how he's going to pay his bill, when he's out there in the lobby and he is hearing, it said, the gay chatter down the hall from that bar. And it talks about that he might go in there and maybe have a couple of drinks and seek companionship. And then he even, like us, well, maybe it'll be a ginger ale. You know. We said, I can't tell you how often my first drink turned out to, I thought I was ordering a ginger ale. Turned out to be a vodka on the rocks. My head was saying ginger ale. Apparently my lips said vodka on the rocks. Bill was contemplating going in there. Why? Because he needed, it says, where he would find some release. I get that, man, when it's tight, when I am bound up by the bondage of self, I need some release. I need some freedom from me. I need some freedom from those feelings. And then, of course, that glass case was just down the hall with the all the names and numbers that he could call, and ultimately he did. He hooks up with Dr. Bob, and I won't go into detail. Number one, I hate referencing history at all, because half the crowd is now going to ChatGPT to fact check me in real time. No, it was a Tuesday, not a Wednesday, Steve, and there were 4 of them, not 5 of them, and it was 72.6 degrees on that day, Steve. But in broad strokes, In broad strokes, Bill finds his way to Dr. Bob, and they have that conversation that Kent mentioned. They have that conversation where Bill spoke to him, not informationally, but experientially. You know, when I was early sober, I'd go home sometimes to my wife, Connie. A lot of people here know Connie. Now, Connie's sobriety date is 10 days after mine, which, by the way, is a really important 10 days. Yeah. If something goes wrong at our house, I'd say, wait 10 days, baby. This will clear up for you. Yeah. I wish you could see what I can see from this place. But in fact, but Connie's sobriety date's 10 days after mine, but it was 4 years before she came to AA, and she has that story to tell. And she's just a wonderful AA. I wish I was the AA member that my wife is and the sponsor that my wife is. But I come home from those early meetings and I go, you should have heard the speaker tonight. He or she was unbelievable. And Connie goes, well, what'd they say? And I go, I don't know. I don't know. Because see, what I know now is we were speaking the language of the heart. And I'm sure there was tremendous, useful, helpful information. But those men and women weren't touching me intellectually. They were touching me experientially. They were touching me internally in a way that I couldn't articulate. You can't explain a spiritual experience. So I didn't understand it. You know, I was at a conference a number of years ago, and I know my California friends will remember Dave Barge, and I didn't know Dave at the time, right? This was 20-something years ago, and I'd given a talk that night, and the next morning Dave comes by my breakfast table and introduced himself. We had a mutual friend who said, encouraged us to meet. And Dave came by and he said, Steve, I sure did like your talk last night. He said, I don't remember the words to the song, but I sure did love the music. And see, I think that's what was happening to me early on. It's the music. Something resonates with me in a way that I can't articulate. I don't have language to describe the feeling, except I knew I was in the right place. I didn't know whether I'd stay, but I knew that you guys had something that was real. Yeah. When Bill is talking to Bob, now they're getting a little excited, right? They now are hanging around, and as it turns out, Bill would stay there for 3 months. But on the front end of that, Dr. Bob's kind of, fired up, as others have said, about what Bill shared with him. But there are a couple of things that made him a little nervous. That restitution thing, right? We talked about those 6 tenets. Yeah, I think a lot of us balk at that restitution thing, but and the way Bob was looking at it and the way it's described in the book, it was that Bob was afraid to expose professionally and his family by going around and looking people in the eye and talking about how he had been living his life. And he said to Bill, at least it says here in the book, I'll do anything but that. Man, I want to tell you, my troubles in Alcoholics Anonymous early on and today are when I hit the I'll do anything but that. The but that's are going to get a guy like me all the time. That commitment I say I made in the 3rd step was to move the but that's out of the way. Because I'm turning my will and my life over to the care of God. I'm saying, do with me as you will, except that. Yeah, we got an addendum to the contract, God. Here's a list of conditions. I was looking at it, and stay out of my money if you don't mind, and unless you're plussing it. Don't be messing with my relationship unless you're making her adore me. Yeah. In other words, our book talks about a Bush League pinch hitter. The 12 and 12 does. I sometimes still treat God like the genie in the lamp. Me get my 3 wishes. And I got a performance clause. And it's got a time limit. You got to answer my prayer in my time, yet you guys have told me, years ago, I went to Tom with something, and he said, Steve, there is no time in the spiritual world. So because I prayed a prayer 15 years ago, or pray one today that's not answered to my satisfaction, doesn't mean that those things aren't moving in that direction. I just want it by Tuesday at noon. I want it to look like this. I want to know it's happening. I was driving down the road. I live in Nashville, and my friends Mike and Diane are here with us too. And we're kind of Bible Beltish there, but we got a lot of the big mega churches, right? And if you drive down through there, you'll see the inspirational signs. And about 20 years ago, I'm driving down Franklin Road there, and there's a big sign that said, if you've been looking for a sign from God, this is it. And I'm like, no, would you move that sign, please? I'm looking for God. I step over signs from God all the time because they don't look like I think they should look. They're not wrapped the way I think they should be. I'm playing God and not knowing it. When I talk about Bill standing there in the lobby of the hotel and being drawn by that gay crowd inside. A little further in the chapter, and this is kind of like what I just shared with you a few minutes ago about the similarities between what AA offers and what I used to think I was getting from a few drinks. Over here it talks about those early meetings, right, where they met in someone's home. It says, many a man yet dazed from his hospital experience has stepped over the threshold of that home into freedom. Many an alcoholic who entered there came away with an answer. He succumbed to that gay crowd inside who understood who laughed at their misfortunes and understood his. We are that gay crowd inside. And that idea that you laughed at your misfortunes, but you didn't laugh at mine. And I know the stuff I put on the table early on, later I can look back and go, God forbid you ask me for the topic. I got one. And it's usually him, her, them, that. Nobody ever, that to my face and that I'm aware of, made fun of me in AA. Nobody embarrassed me in AA. Plenty of people had conversations with me, maybe one-on-one. Somebody was asking me not long ago, Steve, what do you do with somebody who just keeps going in and out? What do you do with somebody who can't stay sober and that perennial slipper, if you will? And I got to tell you, I've been here for 36 years now. A lot of people have been here a ton longer. But during that 36 years, I've gone through several stages. I went through my Pentecostal stage. And by the way, it was a good stage, for me. I might have done some collateral damage, but you know what I mean. I don't ever want to. I don't want to water down somebody else's experience. I want to allow people to be where they are in the process. But today I just want to be somebody. I want it to be easy to come back. I want to open the door. I don't want to finger wag anymore. I'm tired of being right. No, I'm not tired of being right. I'm tired of you having to agree that I'm right. That's my problem. And see, I was kidding somebody not long ago. I was speaking somewhere and they asked me if I'd come in a day early and do a step workshop. And so Steve, it'd be 4 hours, it'd be an hour, break for an hour, and then do 2 more hours. And I said, I'll do that. And I came in and I saw people start filing into this little clubhouse. And I knew I was in trouble. They all had their books, which is a good thing. They had their highlighters. They were ready for me to break this thing down, brother. Right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that there was going to be at least an hour of this was going to be on if there were 4 or 5 columns in that 4th step. And man, I loved but I'm not that guy. I did whatever I did for an hour. We broke for lunch. I had a asket basket that I had incurred. I said, put an asket basket up here, and I told people, if you've got a question, drop it in the asket basket. We broke for lunch. I came back. There were 2 pieces of paper in the asket basket. The first piece of paper said, do you know the difference between a speaker meeting and a step study? And the second one said, I guess the step study begins after lunch. Yeah. And I got to tell you, there's a time that would have put me in the fetal position. And the thing is, I get it. Because there's just, and there's a lot of dials on the radio. We got everything in this room from the MSNBC to Fox News of AA. There is room for all of us. That's why we can find the dial that we can hear. The message should not change. This book says it's here to protect the integrity of the message. But it also says that if you're an alcoholic that wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? And it says that's what this book is about. We will tell you what we have done. So all I can do is tell you what I have done in relationship to what the book says, and what you have done might be a little different, or the approach might have been a little different. And I'm more comfortable with that than I've ever been. Because AA is a results-oriented place. How's it going? I tell somebody, if we're playing golf, and I'm 2 under par at the turn, don't give me swing tips, okay? It's going well. Now, if I'm hitting everything over in the woods and saying, man, I don't know how to hit it in the fairway. Anybody see anything I could do differently? Bring it on. We get back here to page 164, which we read often, right, in many of our meetings. That might be one of the chosen readings. I love it. I love a few things it says. It says, still you may say, I'll not have benefit of contact with you who write this book. We cannot be sure. God will determine that. So you must remember that your real reliance is upon Him. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. I got Billy and Jimmy in here. I bet both of you guys know Mary Jane R. Mary Jane was a past trustee. Mary Jane and I are having lunch one day, and I think I said something to the effect that more will be revealed. And Mary Jane said, Steve, let's meet back here this afternoon. You show me where that is in the book. And she was just kidding with me, but it says more will be disclosed. I don't think it makes a difference, but if you're just trying to win a bet, go with that one sometime. Your real reliance is upon Him. He will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. To my knowledge, there's only that word, crave. There's only one other place I see it in our book, and it is the craving for alcohol. The phenomenon of craving is now replaced with the fellowship I crave. In fact, it was the fellowship I craved all along. Kent talked about that letter from Young back to Bill Wilson, where he said what Roland really had at a low level was a spiritual thirst for union with God. And since I've decided for me that God is deep within, what I'm doing here in AA is trying to get rid of those things that block me off from that divine spark. It says our book is meant to be suggestive only. You know, I believe what the book says over further in how it works. It says, following are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. So we talk about the suggestions, and somebody will say, look, Steve, these are just suggestions. I go, I know. But in AA, it's the only suggestion we got. We don't have a second suggestion. What we're saying is we don't have a monopoly on God. We don't have a monopoly on staying sober. What we have is a program that worked for us. And if I'm in AA, I should probably do AA. And if I want to do something else, AA encourages me in working with others. We encourage the new man to follow his conscience. Keeping in mind, we alcoholics have much in common. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. Whoa. Have you met the person in your home group who realizes they know only a little? Yeah. And I'm not that guy, right? That might be for us big book thumpers. That may be the sentence that's paid least attention to because of our unwillingness to continue to evolve, not just in our personal recovery, but as a fellowship. Not change the program, but the fellowship can evolve. We realize we know only a little. See to it that your relationship with Him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. That has happened for me. I would guess it's happened for many of you here. And the way it's happened for me is not that new events are happening, it's that I recognize the value of the events that were already in place. This is a great event. When I show up for my daughter, that's a great event. When she answers the phone when I call so we can have a conversation, that's a great event. When my wife and I have a nice evening together, that's a great event. The world doesn't change, my relationship to the world changes. That's what a spiritual experience looks and feels like to me. Abandon yourself to God as you know God. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. That's how we are joined here this weekend. We are in fellowship of the Spirit. When it said earlier in the book that we've got this common problem, right? We are shipwrecked. But that common problem would not keep us together. It is the common solution. The common solution in Alcoholics Anonymous is to go through these steps that are a pathway to the power, that connect me to a power that solves my problem. And the way it solves my problem is by making it no longer a problem. The way it solves my problem is changing my relationship with you, not you changing. You will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. I would suggest for the last 36 years, I have been trudging the road of happy destiny. And some days, I've got alcoholism today. I mean, the idea that I had alcoholism when I wasn't drinking was a foreign idea to me when I got here. But I got alcoholism today. Sometimes I suffer from it. Sometimes I don't. But I hadn't been drunk from it since June the 30th of 1989. And I am so grateful to be sober, to be here, to join with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. Thank you so much for having me.